Warning: the creator of this video does not share the views expressed by the individuals featured in it. This video is not intended to promote extreme ideologies or political movements. This film was created solely for educational and documentary purposes. The stories presented in this video are intentionally condensed and appropriately censored to meet YouTube's strict guidelines. What would you do to someone who hurts people? Very young people at that. Children. Just thinking about it probably brings many bad words to your lips. So what if you took matters into your own hands? And as an act of revenge, so as to completely discourage any potential criminals from even having such ideas, you could simply humiliate an objectively evil perpetrator that you have caught. Of course, you should also record the entire process and post it on the internet, to the delight of those who will be happy to watch such vigilante justice, and what's more, they would probably even pay to watch it, or even better, will pay to take an active part in such a show. So this is the kind of activity that Maxim Marcinkiewicz, better known as Tesak, was involved in. And although this is what he gained the most popularity from, his even more controversial actions have been following him since at least early 90s. So if you would like to learn more about this guy, enjoy the video. This video is really controversial, really good and really serious, but really controversial. So please consider subscribing, liking and commenting this video to bring it up to more people. Also consider supporting me on Patreon. It would be really amazing because I don't make any money off of these videos, at least for now. And even if I have my YouTube monetization, for this video would be probably too controversial to be monetized. So your support is crucial to this operation. Your support is welcome. Thank you for almost 300 subscribers we got here. And yeah, we're coming back to the video now. Maxim Sergeyevich Marcinkiewicz, born on May 8, 1984 in Moscow, nicknamed Tesak, meaning a machete, can probably be classified with one word: skinhead. He loved fighting for the sake of fighting and struggle in the name of a higher purpose. From the very beginning of his adult life, he was politically engaged in various extreme movements, holding a high position in their hierarchy. Many times he described himself as one coming from a family with multi-ethnic but mostly Slavic roots, which included Russian, Polish, Lithuanian and Belarusian roots. Since his early years, he had very extremist views and beliefs which were supported by his father. However, his mother did not approve of his ways. His nickname comes from his pure passion for weapons. What's interesting to note is that he graduated from the School of Architecture and Construction. His extreme views and beliefs created a very interesting biography in which, besides typical fights, he had criminal cases for severe beatings, slander, racism, propagation of extreme ideologies, or even for straight-up murder later on. In this video I would rather not dissect Tesak's psychological profile, and I will try my best to keep most of the comments to myself, or to you to comment yourself under this video. However, one conclusion has been following me ever since I delved into his character, namely that his later projects, for which he is best known, in which he caught bad people trying to exploit minors, seem to be just an excuse. Of course, also an attempt to do a favor to society while satisfying his desires to sow chaos and bloodshed, which he never managed to grow out of. Killing two birds with one stone, sometimes literally. Bro just wanted Fight Club that in real life. And that's it for the general information and other introductions to this wicked character. Let's move on to the story of Marcinkiewicz, described as accurate as possible. Young Tesak appeared in many TV interviews. One of such documentaries that included Tesak himself was a documentary made by Polish television. In one of the episodes of the series White Train Tracks, journalist Barbara Włodarczyk spent one day with a typical Russian skinhead. namely Tesak. And this is a really intriguing video that I really recommend for you to watch. It's re-uploaded somewhere on YouTube, so you can check it out yourself. But in short, in the video, Tesak explains that he hates minorities in Russia and he has no intent to hide it. He fights people he considers bad for Russian society, especially if they are not Russian. Among the motivation for his views, he mentioned, for example, the terrorist attack in Moscow that took place in the 1990s, in which his ex-girlfriend allegedly died. Since these events, his aversion to foreign citizens and other ethnic minorities has turned into pure, unhinged hatred. And although it's currently suggested that these Moscow attacks in the late 1990s could have been directly prepared not by the Chechen minority but by the Russian state itself to create an excuse and social consent to declare the Second Chechen War, and also the whole thing was a dirty political game in raising the support of none other than Vladimir Putin. Despite all of this, Tesak did not care about these silly details. Tesak's pure desire to just seek chaos was expressed by him very directly and regardless of the circumstances. According to the findings of the Lenta.ru website, when young Tesak was drafted into the army, after a few days of service, he just straight up beat up one of his Azerbaijani colleagues. For this reason alone, he was referred to additional psychological evaluation, and this way he basically avoided further service. As for his girlfriend, Ola, her parents were described as high-ranking Moscow officials. Her mother worked in the president's administration and her father worked in the Federal Security Service. So one can only suspect that he had some contacts. What's also important to note is that during the time of filming the documentary, Maxim lived in a Moscow housing estate right next to the residence of former president Boris Yeltsin, so we can suspect that he was probably quite well off. His mother was a doctor and his father ran his own business. Maybe that's why he had enough time for political activity from such a young age. In the documentary, young Maxim repeatedly brags about fights he caused. At the end of the film, we also learn the secrets of the extreme organization, People's National Party, of which he was a member, and it is all so extreme that I cannot really tell you about it directly, so please watch it yourself. However, some very interesting thoughts are mentioned there. For example, about democracy, which according to party representatives is possible only where bananas grow. And in the north, in the Russian state, of course there is no democracy whatsoever, but what's more important, it's simply impossible to have democracy in a country like Russia because of the eternal struggle for survival. Soon after he became a member of this nationalistic party, Tesak created his own organization called Format 18, which primarily included like-minded skinheads, and the number in the name refers to one famous Austrian painter name. The organization's members did not hide their hatred for minorities in Russia. They repeatedly attacked homeless Asian migrant workers, filmed these actions and posted them on the internet. At that time, Tesak also co-created several radical, albeit allegedly staged films showing terrible things being done to defenseless people. In one such film, members of Format 18 dealt with a Tajik bad substances dealer. According to the Investigative Committee of Russia, not all of these films were staged, and some actions shown in them actually took place, which actually entails criminal liability. Finally, in September of 2010, a Russian court banned all the activities of Format 18 due to extremism. But Tesak didn't care that much. Tesak generally didn't give a single fuck about all of this. He just did practically all the extreme things, broke every discriminatory law, and yes, such a law exists even in a country like Russia. The Criminal Code of the Russian Federation clearly explains the liability and consequences for discrimination and extremist activity in their Article 282. However, as I said, Tesak didn't care. He continued to act this way and he was not afraid of anything at all. But he should have been afraid. On February 28, 2007, Marcinkiewicz and his colleagues visited Moscow club Bilingua, where political debates often took place. It was then that one of such panels was organized by none other than Russian oppositionist Alexei Navalny. Their journalists Yulia Latinina and Maxim Kononenko, among many others, were having a little discussion. So Marcinkiewicz stood up and asked them if they agreed that in order for Russia to develop successfully, it seems viable to kill all the liberals. After asking the question, he and his companions began to chant greetings and Roman salutes, continuing this behavior for several minutes. This action amounts to promoting radical ideologies and extremism, which is strictly prohibited in Russia, and as it was later proved, it's also quite effectively enforced. After this incident, Navalny and other organizers even wrote a special letter to the Russian prosecutor's office. For his offenses, on the 2nd of July 2007, Tesak was arrested after an ambush prepared for him and his associates in the gym, where he often trained with his colleagues. On February 18, 2008, Tesak was sentenced to 3 years in prison under the Article 282 on discrimination and extremism. Critics later suggested that the case was conducted in unclear conditions, mostly ignoring Tesak's criminal past, and many people said that the sentence he received, especially considering his previous activities and minor legal troubles, was exceptionally lenient. His second criminal case took place in 2009. It primarily concerned a certain film in which very bad things were allegedly staged to be done to a fictional Tajik bad substance dealer. For this specific movie, Tesak was again sentenced to 3 years in prison for inciting hatred or enmity on the grounds of nationality or religious affiliation. That is again under Article 282. Marcinkiewicz himself spoke about the case in this way. "I think they will give me 5 years at least because the bad substance dealers are, as far as I'm concerned, a socially protected group under our constitution. In principle, of course, I respect the decision of our court, and apparently I will have to apologize to the bad substance dealers. I am very glad that I did not speak out against other people who hurt children anywhere, because then I think I would have received another sentence, and perhaps a more serious at that. I suspect that other people who hurt children are an even more socially protected group." On the last day of 2010, Marcinkiewicz was finally released from custody. A year and a half after his release, he even tried to run for the coordinating council of the Russian opposition. He was even registered as a participant in the elections, but was later disqualified due to his extreme views and apparently insufficient opposition. After Format 18 was basically shut down by the Russian authorities and Marcinkiewicz was wandering around, going to many court hearings, and then he was free and was released for a brief while, he decided to create another movement called Restrukt, after he had written a book of the same name. And you can probably guess what was in this book. It was something of a manifesto. So it was under Restrukt movement that the most successful and popular Tesak's projects were created. With the help of the Restrukt movement, the legendary projects Occupy the Very Bad People Who Harm Children or Occupy the Very Bad People Who Sell Bad Substances were created. These projects resulted in a whole series of videos in which Tesak and his colleagues met with criminals they had lured and actually abused them, so that the whole thing could be later watched on many different websites online. The aim of these projects was to find bad people on social media using a bait, a decoy, and hold preventive talks with them. Marcinkiewicz liked to call such activities safari, and it was possible for the viewer to even join them for a small fee. In general, although the idea of this entire operation might even seem morally right, in reality, safety of children seemed like an excuse for beating gay people. Because for Tesak and his men, the difference between homosexuals and people exploiting children was blurred. There's more. Sometimes the victims had already reached the age of consent, so from the point of the law, there were no problems whatsoever. And also, according to the Russian authorities, some correspondence justifying the radical actions of the Tesak's people could have been simply faked, and there could be cases of adults that met with other adults for completely non-sexual purposes. Despite all of this, Tesak's actions from the series seemed to gain a lot of social support. The series also gained followers from other countries. It's also interesting and worth noting that one of Marcinkiewicz's partners in the Restrukt movement was Roman Żelaznov, known as Zukel, who personally went to Ukraine in 2014 to join the local armed forces. Therefore, Zukel took an active part in the conflict in Donbas on the Ukrainian side. Tesak interpreted his decisions as treason Ukraine, because from his point of view the Restrukt movement should be more apolitical, while Zukel actively encouraged their members to go to pro-Ukrainian rallies in Russia. Also, Russia quickly initiated a criminal case against Zukel for supporting Ukraine and joining their army. Among many other interesting facts and situations from Tesak's life during the Restrukt period, the situation from August 2013 also stands out. It was then that he met the known writer Edward Bagirov. So they met and Marcinkiewicz hugged him many times and decided to kiss him. Yeah, that didn't happen at all. Quite the opposite happened, actually, but YouTube will kill me if I show it. I don't care. Tesak strongly disliked Bagirov's various Russophobic statements and texts, including his tweets about Tesak himself, which were mostly negative. The whole event was of course recorded and posted on the internet.
Ой, подожди, ты же боец. Ты что, мне заявление пишешь?
What's also interesting is that Tesak also tried to create a financial pyramid scheme for his supporters to join. The project was called Tesak Money, and Marcinkiewicz co-created it with one of his supporters, Filip Raziński, who privately wrote game engines for online casinos. However, when Tesak later had further problems with the law, which we'll discuss in a moment, Raziński took the rest of the money that the members of the Restruct movement invested and then fled to Israel. That's it. I even found an amateur film promoting this Tesak Money initiative. So guess what happened next? Another proceeding was initiated against Tesak, because it turned out that fanatical and revolutionary book Restrukt was indeed fanatical and revolutionary. The book itself was therefore officially considered extremist, and as quickly as it appeared, it was quickly removed from all these stores in Russia. And due to the fact that Tesak himself and many of his colleagues, many other Restrukt members, were subject to many court proceedings, including even a major murder case, the movement finally decided to announce self-dissolution. And Tesak himself? He most certainly wasn't slowing down. Meanwhile, in 2013, in one of the episodes of his famous series Occupy the Bad People Who Hurt Children, Tesak with his colleagues cut a very characteristic creep. It wasn't just your usual creep, because this one was particularly influential. By pretending to be a minor, they lured a certain Andrei Kaminov to come to a meeting with a child, and although he was caught red-handed, he politely assured everyone that he only wanted to teach the potential victim a lesson. Tesak and his gang could not believe their own eyes. They just caught a high-ranking officer of the Russian Federal Bailiff Service. 38 years old Kaminov has been serving as a deputy head of the Moscow Oblast Department since June 2012. He has a number of awards for his service, including the medals for service of the 2nd and 3rd degrees and an honorary diploma of the Federal Bailiff Service. When the recording of this whole event was published online, Kaminov almost instantly resigned from his position. But this specific case just showed on how of a thin ice Tesak was standing on. Maybe Kaminov was not the biggest fish, but this shows that Tesak was poking at people who had their connections. And connections in a country like Russia are basically everything. And although Kaminov not only resigned from his job, but from what I understood he was even convicted for his misconduct, this big and ugly machine of revenge had probably already started. And Tesak with his colleagues were getting on the nerves of more and more really influential people in Russia. It almost seemed like they were getting on the nerves of the Russian Federation itself. And who gets on the nerves of the Russian Federation on the land of the Russia? Let's just say it isn't a game you can win. Especially if Russia is not the only country that has brought criminal proceedings against him. In February 2013, Tesak showed up in Belarus to undergo laser vision correction. The glasses he wore in more recent videos were not for disguise as a nerd to mislead his opponents. Marcinkiewicz had vision problems, having a sight defect reaching -7 diopters. However, before he could start the treatment, the fans of the Partisan Club, who considered themselves part of the anti-fascist movement, were awaiting him in a Minsk. So a serious fight happened between them and Tesak's group. According to some reports, the anti-fascists followed the taxi in which Tesak and his associates arrived at the clinic. The conflict began in the yard of the medical center itself. Within a few minutes, the local police department arrived at the gates of the clinic and stopped the fight. Tesak was therefore charged with hooliganism, in particular violation of Part 3 of Article 339 of the Belarusian Criminal Code. If the court found him guilty, he could face a sentence of 3 to 10 years in prison. However, this particular case ended rather quickly. On the 5th of March 2013, Marcinkiewicz was allowed to leave Belarus, and on April 16th of the same year, the case against him was finally closed. However, that was not the end of his problems at all. In November of 2013, none other than Tesak even visited Ukrainian Euromaidan, where he recorded many vlogs speaking out his opinions about the escalating situation. At the time, he believed that Ukraine should remain independent from Russia, and that in general, if such protests were to take place in Russia itself, it would end with the protests being suppressed and the participants being taken away to face jail time. At the same time, however, in other vlogs, Tesak spoke out against Ukraine's integration with the European Union. And here comes the third Russian criminal case, which was almost the last nail in his literal coffin. Right after returning from Ukraine in December, Tesak was arrested again on charges of extremism, incitement to hatred and hostility, and humiliation of human dignity using violence. In the meantime, however, 3 videos appeared on his YouTube channel. In one of those videos, in his subjective review of the movie Stalingrad, according to court experts, he was supposed to show disrespect for the veterans of the Great Patriotic War, which is very significant and important in Russia. He was also supposed to draw a number of inappropriate conclusions, however absurd it may sound. The investigation also examined Tesak's videos from the Occupy Bad People Who Want to Exploit Children series. Marcinkiewicz himself later claimed that this third case was the result of lobbying by people liking children too much, and the main motivation behind his case was supposed to be revenge. Above all, Tesak strongly emphasized the connection between the case and him catching red-handed the aforementioned official of the Russian Baliv service, Andrei Kaminov. During the trial, Tesak fled to Cuba via Ukraine and Belarus out of concern for his safety. According to media reports, he planned to stay there and continue publishing his videos. However, on January 17, 2014, he was detained by Cuban authorities. On January 27th, he was expelled from Cuba for violating immigration law and sent to Russia in handcuffs. In the summer of that year, trials were already actively underway in Moscow. Marcinkiewicz was primarily charged with inciting ethnic hatred. According to the official indictment, Tesak posted 3 extremist videos on the social network VKontakte from September 14th to October 14th, 2013. These were the reviews of the films Stalingrad and Okolo Futbola, and the third film Throw a Wedge, which allegedly contained psychological threats. The court agreed with the prosecutor's request on August 15th, sentencing Marcinkiewicz to 5 years in a maximum security prison colony. On November 11th of the same year, the Moscow City Court reduced the sentence to 2 years and 10 months of imprisonment after considering the convict's appeal. However, that's not all. In 2015, Tesak had his 4th criminal case in Russia. On March 18th of the same year, he was charged with older case of robbery and hooliganism. He was found guilty of attacking citizens, one of whom allegedly died. The prosecutor requested a sentence of 11 years and 6 months in a maximum security prison colony. The judge partially agreed with the prosecutor's request, sentencing Marcinkiewicz to 10 years on June 27, 2017. According to other court documents, one of Tesak's accomplices also received a 10-year sentence, while the others involved received 3 to 5 years. Although the verdict was appealed, it ultimately remained unchanged. In 2019, Tesak was held in a double cell in the Russian federal prison SIZO-1, Matroskaya Tishina. Here's what Tesak wrote to his fans on social media before going to prison. Greetings, my little extreme lovers. I will soon go to prison. In about a month, a Moscow court will consider the appeal and I will serve a prison sentence for homophobia. And doves fly over our area. But here's what came to my mind. Someone very influential and very pink ordered me to be imprisoned, and spitting in the face of the whole country, the Center for Countering Extremism, Interpol, the investigative committee, the prosecutor's office, and the court carried out the orders. Eliminating a person in this system is not expensive nor hard. I remember, for example, Maxim Bazilev, pseudonym Adolf, who committed in prison in Petrovka. Therefore, I now declare with full responsibility that my struggle is not over. Under no circumstances will I harm myself. If suddenly in the temporary detention facility I will harm myself, then someone help me doing so. I have no heart problems or other diseases. I say this just in case. I am pissed at all of those who initiated and conducted my criminal case. What's interesting to note here is that there's also a video circulating on the internet from one of Tesak's trials in which he shows some characteristic hand signs, and so the rumor appeared that he was communicating to the camera in sign language that he doesn't plan to end himself. However, I was unable to verify this information, and these hand movements could just as well be some Russian gang signs. As for Tesak himself in prison, it's really difficult to say if the prison had changed him or if this situation pushed him to this major change, because he basically made some minor corrections in his views. In any case, in many letters sent from jail to his family, friends, and therefore fans that were published in many social media websites such as VKontakte, he many times wrote that his views have evolved. He believed that not violence, but free market and a healthy competition would allow for a constructive fight against, for example, people who sold bad substances. In the letters, he also spoke out in favor of the Libertarian Party of Russia. In economics, I increasingly come to the conclusion that the less the state interferes in regulation, control, support, participation, and other dirty tricks, the better. Let's adopt rational, effective, and fair laws and then ensure that they are followed. Everything that can be done should be given into private hands. After reading the book The Gulag Archipelago, Tesak even noticed the bad side of Leninist Stalinist regimes. After 20 pages, I felt ashamed that I hadn't read it for so long. It's impossible to stop reading. If I had read Gulag before writing Restrukt, I wouldn't have even started writing it. Tesak ultimately did not change his extreme views, but he at least softened them somewhat. It's also really difficult to tell if he really believed in what he wrote in those letters, or if it all was just a play to fool the people who were threatening him. In fact, it's really difficult to say if even he himself wrote these letters or it was just someone else. Because in the end, Tesak did not have enough time to resocialize himself. The final punishment awaited him, the one punishment that couldn't be revoked. On September 16th, Maxim Sergeyevich Marcinkiewicz, known as Tesak, was found dead in his jail cell in the Chelyabinsk detention center. According to official reports, he committed suicide. A farewell letter was found on him. Dear Prison Administration, I apologize for the inconvenience I caused. I have one last huge request for you. Send my letter to this address. Here is the number. Ekaterina Ruslanova Elisieva. She is my concubine. She lives in Yekaterinburg. Please give her the book Protectionism and Communism and the Black Diary. Get rid of everything else. 15th of September 2020, Marcinkiewicz. Later, another note was also discovered. It was written in his name and was probably addressed to his girlfriend. I did it. But dying is not so bad after all. I love you. Your Maxim. 15th of September 2020. Curiously, in the article about the case, the Daily Mail quoted a handwriting expert who stated that one of these notes was written by a woman, and there are many more doubts about his real motive and the events themselves. Of course, the whole defense, family, and his supporters did not believe in the version that he withdrew from this world by himself. Beside the fact that Tesak mentioned several times before going to prison that he doesn't plan to die, he was not going anywhere from this world and he was healthy. A little after his end, in May 2021, he was just about to get released from prison, but he didn't make it. This resulted from the fact that along the way, his sentence, at least according to the family's testimony, was apparently shortened from 10 to 8 years. And suddenly, 8 months before leaving jail, he just decided to end it all? According to Russian oppositionist Levkovich, for most of the 2020, both Tesak's relatives and lawyers could not reach and contact him at all. all. Marcinkiewicz's lawyer himself, Ivan Siewiorowicz, stated that he was denied contact with his client. The list of coincidences and strange events is of course longer, because on the day of his departure, the camera monitoring system was broken. Who would have thought? Another lawyer of Marcinkiewicz, Alexei Mikalik, on the day of these events, September 16th, stated that a week earlier, on September 9th, he finally managed to meet with Marcinkiewicz. It was then that Tesak confided in him that for the last 3 months he had been beaten and tortured, forced in such a way to sign a confession for the murders that took place in Moscow in the 1990s. Moreover, on September 17th, a representative of the Russian Investigative Committee informed that shortly before his departure, Marcinkiewicz had confessed to a double murder committed in 2007, which was later confirmed by video recordings released in 2021, where Tesak actually confesses to the crimes. However, the deceased's testimony did not go to waste. It was included in the investigation in the case against a group of Marcinkiewicz's former associates. And here it gets worse, because on December 3rd, 2020, it turned out that a third Marcinkiewicz's farewell letter had been found earlier. During the examination of the body, another farewell letter was found in his oral cavity, wrapped in plastic, written by Marcinkiewicz himself. Its content indicated that he did not commit the murders he confessed to, but that he also defamed other people mentioned in his testimony. This is what we could read in the cited by his lawyer text of the decision to refuse to initiate criminal proceedings in the case of Tesak's death, because understandably his lawyers and family were outraged and demanded an immediate investigation into his literal murder. There are many more inaccuracies in this case, but I should spare you the details because this is YouTube and not LiveLeak. In short, even more independent experts have even more evidence and issues indicating that Marcinkiewicz could not have done this to himself, and the Russian services doesn't seem to care about it. Tesak was a really specific and loud figure, especially in Eastern Europe. And I think that's all I can really say without starting a war in the comments of this video. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. Take care. Thank you all for watching.